Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. Tiny Egyptian Fetus. A tiny fetus discovered inside an equally tiny coffin has proved to be the youngest Egyptian mummy ever found. The coffin itself was discovered over 100 years ago, but it was only recently that researchers in England completed a CT scan of the coffin to see what was inside. They initially thought the coffin held the internal organs of an adult who was mummified inside a much larger coffin, but they were shocked to see that it contained the tiny mummy of a fetus, likely only 16 weeks old at the time of death. According to officials at the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge, it's possible that the fetus perished from a miscarriage, as it never fully lived outside of its mother's womb. It must have been such a devastating event that the mother chose to have the unborn infant buried with all the respect that any other person would receive after death. The coffin was originally found in Giza in 1907 and only measured 17 inches long. It was buried around the year 644 BC and was decorated in painstakingly small carvings. After its discovery, it was cataloged and stored inside the museum because nobody believed there was anything except organs inside. However, once they did the CT scan and found a miniature skeleton, researchers were left speechless. This is now the youngest mummy ever discovered, even older than the two fetuses found in King Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922. Number 9. The Pateshwar Cave Complex. The district of Pateshwar in India is famous for its fascinating rock-cut shrines and mysterious temples. There are approximately 8 ancient caves dedicated to Lord Shiva, one of the principal deities in Hinduism. Shiva is the god responsible for creating and transforming the universe, and is also known as the destroyer of all things. But Shiva isn't the only god depicted at the Pateshwar temple complex. There are statues and ancient stone carvings of other deities, some of which are so old nobody even knows who they are anymore. Many of these temples are in terrible condition, crumbling a little more every day, and they are entirely overgrown with vegetation. The whole place is crawling with rat snakes, wild pigs, monkeys, and the occasional peacock. Some of the most shocking features inside the temple complex are the almost countless Shiva lingams littered throughout the site. These are fairly ordinary-looking symbols, with each one almost resembling a stone thumb. The lingams are a representation of Lord Shiva, a symbol encapsulating all the energies of the physical world, as well as the world beyond. It's an emblem that can be found in just about every Shiva temple in India. However, at Pateshwar, there are thousands of them. Nobody really knows why there are so many of these symbols here, or what their purpose is. It's not even clear when exactly these cave temples were constructed, although some of the newer temples at the site were likely made around the 16th century. Number 8. The Mysterious Settlement. When Captain James Cook discovered Norfolk Island in 1774, he described it as a paradise. It was unoccupied, littered with beautiful trees, and ripe for the pillaging. Cook quickly declared the island for the British Crown, although these days it's an external territory of Australia. It's located in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean, about 900 miles from Australia's nearest shoreline. Even all these years later, there are only about 2,100 people living across Norfolk Island. However, just because James Cook found the island unoccupied doesn't mean it wasn't inhabited at some point. When the Australian Museum did a scientific expedition on the island to check its biodiversity, they found something unexpected. They discovered the remains of an ancient Polynesian settlement. Dr. Amy Mosig-Way from the Australian Museum says the find is 100% conclusive. Ancient stone tools were uncovered in the dirt, along with the remnants of structures. The buildings and artifacts found here date back to about 1250 AD, when the Polynesians occupied New Zealand and many islands across the Pacific. This is a huge mystery because it's never before been confirmed that humans once lived on the island. But now we know that people were there at least 500 years before Captain Cook ever showed up. Unfortunately, for the time being, we don't know where these people came from, where they went, or what they did while they lived on the island. Number 7. Domesticated wolves. Researchers discovered canine fossils inside a small cave in southern Germany. The fossils inside date back between 17,000 and 12,000 years ago. When scientists conducted DNA analysis of these canine bones, they found a mix of dog, wolf, and fox remains. The strangest part of all is that the three distinct species of canine enjoyed a healthy diet of low-protein food, most likely provided by humans. Researchers found evidence that human beings, primitive cave dwellers, were feeding the dogs, wolves, and foxes. But this is hardly the most exciting part of the discovery. According to Dr. Chris Baumann from the University of Tübingen, scientists believe the cave may have been the epicenter for the earliest wolf domestication in Europe. They were able to link the genetic lineages of the canines to the entire genetic range from ancient wolf to domestic dog. Scientists have long known that domestic dogs broke away from wild wolves about 16,000 years ago. That corresponds to the date of the bones found in the German cave. This mysterious cavern seems to have been some kind of prehistoric puppy mill. Here they mixed dogs, wolves, and foxes to create the first domesticated animals. Our ancestors may have been living in caves, but they were clearly smart enough to partake in the genetic manipulation of wild animals. Number 6. Stone Age Child's Grave. The grave of a child who lived 8,000 years ago was found in eastern Finland in 1992. It was discovered in the town of Tutankhamun, and it's now known as the Majunsuo grave. A new service trail was being made in the forest, and workers noticed a splotch of bright red ochre staining the dirt. This is something you typically see with rock art and ancient burials, so it was clear to researchers that something was hiding underground. However, it wasn't until 2018 that the Finnish Heritage Agency began to excavate the spot. In ancient Finland, prehistoric people buried their dead in underground pits. This was over 6,000 years before the Vikings ever boarded their longships and started pillaging European shorelines. One of the issues in Finland is that their soil is so acidic that most ancient remains are destroyed within a very short time. Here, researchers found the grave, but they barely discovered any remains at all. What they did find was a couple of teeth, fragments of some bird feathers, canine hair strands, and plant fibers. These artifacts were recovered when researchers combed the burial site searching for microscopic evidence. They soon learned the teeth belonged to a child between 3 and 10 years old. The feather fragments likely came from a waterfowl and currently represent the oldest feather fragments found in Finland. It's likely this child was wrapped in clothing made from waterfowl skin and was then laid carefully on a bed of feathers before being buried with great care. The child was also placed in the ground with an arrow laced with falcon feathers and may have had their beloved dog or wolf buried at their feet. Either that or the child was wearing shoes made from wolf fur. We'll likely never know who this child was or what clan they belonged to, but this is currently one of the best preserved prehistoric graves found anywhere in Finland, and it shows just how much they cared for their dead. And now for number 5, but first it's shout-out time! Big thank you to Mrs. John Winchester and Eddie Newingham for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. We'd love to have you! Number 5. Burana Tower. Burana Tower, located in the Republic of Kyrgyzstan, is the last standing monument of the great city of Balasagun, which is otherwise completely gone. This city was originally built by the Iranian Civilization known as the Sogdians roughly 2,000 years ago. The region was then conquered by the Karakhanid nomads from Mongolia and Siberia, and in the years that followed, the Karakhanids converted to Islam and began to build mosques. However, the rise of Islamic beliefs led to the downfall of Buddhism in the area, which ultimately contributed to the city of Balasagun's demise. This city was already in serious decline by the 12th century. The Burana Tower was then built as an attachment to one of the major mosques within Balasagun. This structure is unique because it shares architectural styles from the original Sogdians as well as the newer Persians. However, the Mongols came in 1218 and decimated the city of Balasagun. Yet for whatever reason, they did not destroy the tower. Most of this city was left a smoldering ruin, but Burana Tower miraculously survived. In the 15th century, the earthquake hit the city and destroyed everything that wasn't already crushed by the Mongols. except the tower. It has remained standing all these years, although it has sustained a fair bit of damage. Even in the 20th century, Russian settlers stole bricks from the ancient site to build their own houses. These days, the tower is an archaeological marvel. There is nothing else that even suggests an ancient city once stood in this grassy valley, except the tower standing 82 feet tall against the sky. Number 4. Rare gold sword pommel. A mysterious solid gold sword pommel, or handle, was discovered by a metal detectorist near Blair Drummond in the UK. The pommel has been deemed an exceptionally rare discovery, with the small artifact worth over $30,000. The senior curator from the Medieval Archaeology and History Unit at National Museum Scotland says nothing like it has ever been found in the United Kingdom before. The sword pommel is impressive, expertly crafted and decorated with remarkable detail, but nobody knows who it belonged to, where it came from, or if it's evidence of a previously unknown ancient battle. Upon closer inspection of the artifact, archaeologists realized it was crafted in the shape of a bird. There is a beak at each end, and it has the eyes of a bird of prey. It appears to be a mixture between Anglo-Saxon art and Christian iconography. The sword pommel is also decorated with mythical beasts, the crucifixion, and the tree of life. It's rich in tiny and very intricate carvings, making it even more of a mystery. It's hard to imagine what the sword had once looked like. We don't know exactly when the sword handle was made, but it was likely around 1,000 years ago at the beginning of the Middle Ages. It must have belonged to a very skilled warrior, or at least someone of great importance, maybe even a king. Number 3. The vampire. Scientific detectives recently used new cutting-edge technology to uncover the identity of a vampire. The vampire's corpse was discovered about 3 decades ago in Griswold, Connecticut. He was found with his arms crossed in the shape of an X across his chest, something that was done in the 19th century if a person was believed to have supernatural powers. Somebody thought this guy might rise from the grave and feast on the blood of his neighbors, so they placed his arms over his chest to prevent that from happening. It's unlikely this individual, a man named John Barber, was a real vampire. It's believed he suffered from tuberculosis, which typically causes people to cough up blood. In the 19th century, Americans thought people who had tuberculosis might be vampires, coughing up the blood of their most recent victim. And so, rather than being helped, these sick people were usually treated as monsters. Scientists with Parabon Nano Labs performed DNA analysis on the unidentified remains of the alleged vampire. He's been called John Barber all this time because of the markings JB55 on his grave. Historical records showed someone living in the community named John Barber around the time of his death. The team then took things a step further and reconstructed his face. Machine learning models were used to determine the vampire had fair skin, brown hair, brown eyes, and a lot of freckles. They then used 3D imaging techniques to recreate what he looked like, and honestly, he resembled a villain from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Number 2. World's oldest chess piece. Chess is one of the oldest games in the world, and its name is derived from the Persian word for king, Shah. Its origins can be traced back to India around the 6th century BC, at least 1,500 years ago. During the mighty Gupta Empire, the game of chess was called Chaturanga, and it was played by all the most important members of society. Researchers believe the game spread from India along the Silk Road, was picked up in the Middle East, and somehow made its way to Europe. It was the Europeans who changed the name to chess, and over the years, the rules of the game evolved into what we know them as today. In 1991, the oldest game piece was discovered by archaeologists in the Middle East. John Oleson from the University of Victoria believes a sandstone figure found at a site in Jordan is the oldest chess piece found anywhere in the world. It appears to be a rook or a castle, recovered from the site of Humayma. This place was an old trading post established in the 1st century by the Nabatean kingdom, the same people who built Petra. John Oleson says the piece was likely meant to look like a chariot when it was first carved, since rooks were originally chariots and not castles. In fact, the queen was once called the vizier. It didn't become the queen until the English changed it in the 15th century. Number 1. Ancient footprints. The northwest coast of England is home to a staggering number of prehistoric animal tracks fossilized in ancient mud. There are also human footprints here, with the oldest dating back 9,000 years, and one of the youngest coming from the medieval days, about 1,000 years ago. Dr. Alison Burns recently found a perfectly preserved footprint that belonged to a young man who walked across the shoreline 8,200 years ago. This individual's print is extremely unique because the doctor recognized a bunion on their little toe. People back then didn't typically wear footwear. Because they were barefoot all the time, whenever they sat down, their little toe would rub against the ground. This usually caused bunions. The whole area was once a tidal mudflat, which would explain why the footprints were found on the beach in the first place. Ancient humans walked across the mudflats long before it was ever a beach, and their indentations in the muck were then baked in the scorching sun. This created a solid cast of the footprint, and then it was buried for millennia. It's a mysterious thing to behold now because it shows just how different the UK was thousands of years ago. It was a mudflat teeming with prehistoric oxes, ancient lynx, and extinct species of wolves. Thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe for more amazing archaeological discoveries, and I'll see you next time. Bye!